Okay, so hi, welcome to Moral Thinking. I'm your instructor, Tony, and we will be talking about some normative ethics theories and also some meta-ethics this winter. So welcome. And so this is our lecture for Unit 1. In Unit 1, we talk about, what's the purpose of morality and moral theories, and how do we evaluate the moral theories we have. And we also in Unit 0 read about some kind of basic concepts of moral theory. So I will try to explain and walk you through some of these concepts, and we can talk about them from here. So firstly, why do we need morality at all? So I don't know how you felt about the Poeman paper. Did you like it? Did you not like it? Was it easy to read? Was it hard? Was it weird? So please tell me more about how you felt about those two papers in your discussion posts. So I thought the paper was relatively clear. So it was a clear paper and the explanation was very clear. But as I wanted to talk about some of these concepts, and I hope this can be of some help. So I guess the first idea I want to talk about is the idea of original sin. So firstly, I wanted to highlight that when philosophers talk about a concept, when philosophers use a phrase or a word, sometimes they can mean different things and refer to different things, even if they're using in the exactly the same phrase or word. So here for original sin as an example, so for some strongly religious philosophers who had a lot of commitments to their religion and to their philosophy in that way, and are highly influenced by the kind of religious context, they might use original sin in a way that's strongly religious, that when they use that phrase or word, they refer to something that involves commitment to that religious context and story. And when they use a word, they want you to understand that word, and put it in that context of religion. They want you to think about all that assumptions and relevant ideas in the religious context. But for some other philosophers, even though they're using the exact same word, original sin, they might not actually be committing to all that religious context, and they might not, mean this phrase in any way the religious philosophers meant. They might simply be referring to the idea that we humans have some defects in our nature, and that we by nature can have problematic things in us, that we might be lazy, or we might be evil, or we might want to hurt each other if our desire kind of overtook us. So they might simply be referring to the idea that we humans have defects in our human nature, without meaning anything further. So that is actually a kind of assumption that a lot of people take and commit to, and that kind of is linked to Hobbes' idea. So for Hobbes, he thinks if we have the freedom and the ability to harm others, so in terms of freedom, if we are not restrained by some kinds of morality or law or rules, or authority, and that we are free to do whatever we want in terms of ability, if we were stronger than someone else, or if we had higher IQ, or if we possess more resources, so we are able to harm others. So if we had the freedom and ability to harm others, at the same time, if we had desires of attaining some kinds of ends, this can go really wrong. So imagine that now someone is free and able to harm others, and they have some desires, and someone else is standing in their way of obtaining what they want. This person in Hobbes' view will want to hurt the other person. They will want to harm others to get what they desire. And imagine in this world that we are all like this. We enter into this state of insecurity and uncertainty. It will be ultimate chaos, because people can just do whatever they want, and we would be insecure and uncertain because we don't know if next second someone will show up and just harm me or kill me, because they want what I have, or because I somehow stood in their way. And this kind of chaotic, insecure, uncertain state of the world is what Hobbes calls the state of nature. So as he describes it, it will kind of make us live in an unbearable hell, because things are so uncertain and so chaotic, and there will be so much harms and killing going on. So you might be able to sense that Hobbes kind of had this background assumption or commitment in mind, that if we were free and if we had powers, this is what humans are gonna do. So that's a kind of like a background assumption commitment of it. So Hobbes imagined that we might be in this like state of nature, and we don't want that. So he then proposes that this is why we need morality, because through morality we form some kinds of social contract. So now we all agree that we want to be kind to each other, and killing each other is bad, and we ought not to kill each other. We ought not to harm each other to get what we want. So now we all agree on this, and we all decide, okay, this is how we are gonna act from now. We have this norm now, and even if I am free, and even if I have this kind of power, I now have this constraint on me that I can't just go out and harm people to get what I want, because I've signed on to this contract. I've agreed to this contract, that I'm gonna just do all these things, that morality tells me that I need to do. So to Hobbes, he thinks that even though some people might not like this, but he thinks the vast majority would be better off if we had a social contract of morality. So that is Hobbes' argument for having morality. So I want to highlight one thing, is that because we are an ethics class, so I don't want to talk about Hobbes' theory like in a lot of details, other aspects of it in a lot of details. But Hobbes' theory wasn't just arguing for the necessity of morality. It was also, if not mainly, arguing about the necessity of state. So, for Hobbes, because we don't want to be in a state of nature, we want some kinds of social contract. So a state gave us this kind of social contract. So that's why we want to justify it. That's how we justify it. And because we can justify it, state become legitimate. So I want to warn you that even though those two discussions, they frequently come up together, and it's hard to avoid one if you're talking about the other. They are two distinctive things. They are two completely different things, and we must not mix them up. So the claim that morality is necessary, it doesn't like automatically commit, like force you to commit to the idea that state is necessary, and the other way around. So this is something to pay attention to. And based on this kind of background talk of original sin, and that we have defects in human nature, and the Hobbes idea, I think Poeman had his conclusion or summary, an argument of his 5 purposes of morality. So that's the argument for the aim of morality. Of course, you might not agree with all of this, and if you feel like you don't agree, so please write in discussion posts and tell me why. But if this argument is true, if they have some really valid points, so we now do need morality. So what next? So we now only have this general idea of morality. We won't be able to actually judge because we've only agreed on the idea that we need this social contract of morality, but we haven't figured out like the details of what we actually agree on. So what the norms actually are, and what actually count as right and what count as wrong. You might think white lies are okay, but I might think any lies are not permitted. So we've agreed on that social idea of needing a social contract. We haven't figured out the details of it. So here is why we need moral theories. It's for 2 reasons. So the first reason is a practical purpose. So a moral theory would have this moral principle in it that tells us the criteria of what should be counted right, what should be counted as wrong. So it contains this principle of connecting different things with right and associating different things with wrong. So from here we would have this ruler of measuring what's right and wrong. So we can make a judgment, we can make a decision. And also a moral theory would kind of contain information to kind of explain that why this moral principle think this is right and why it thinks that is wrong. So now we can explain to each other our reasoning and we can justify what we want. So we have this procedure of deciding and discussing and making judgment. So that's a practical purpose. But there is also this theoretical purpose. So imagine that on the street, we're just arguing that I think white lies are wrong, you think white lies are right. We're not going to go anywhere with this, right? Because we can't perceive each other. We need to be able to explain to each other why right is right and why wrong is wrong. I also think that it's kind of, human nature, right? So we are not going to just be satisfied with a conclusion. We always want to ask, why this is right, why that is wrong. So we always are asking more questions. So moral theories will be able to fulfill this purpose. So it helps us to answer this question, why right is right and why wrong is wrong. So from here, we can explain and we can justify, and we can also fulfill our curiosity and need of knowing why this would be the case. So that's why we need moral theory. Now we have moral theories. We will have, so I'm gonna explain some basic concepts of moral theory. So firstly, we have the deontic concepts. So the deontic concepts deal with right and wrong. So it talks about what we ought to do or ought not to do, and it's relevant to the concept of duty. So we have three deontic concepts. So obligatory, so what we have duty to do, optional, so we don't necessarily have a duty to do it. We can do it or not do it. Even if we do it, it's not wrong. And the third concept is wrong. So it's our duty not to do it. If we do it, it will be wrong. So so there are two senses right now. So if we are talking about being right in a narrow sense, it's just like those obligatory actions. But if we are talking about right in a broad sense, both obligatory actions and optional actions count as right. So the concepts is concerned with actions. But then we also have value concepts. So we have two different value concepts. We have intrinsic value and moral worth. I'll talk about like how they're different from each other. So intrinsic value. So firstly, value theories talks about value of something. So unlike the deontic concepts talks about right and wrong. Value concepts talk about what's good or bad or neutral. So, and we have concepts of intrinsic value. So if something has intrinsic value, it's like that for its own sake. So water is water because not because of some external reasons, but because that its molecules were kind of constituted this way. The source of the goodness comes from the thing itself, comes from the nature of the thing. It's kind of in that thing itself. So I'm doing this thing, it's right, not because it produces something for others, not because we need this, not because it gives me glory or whatever. It's right because it's right because it is. It's right because it's good. Sorry, it's good because it is. It's good because it has this nature. It's good just for its own sake. Well, extrinsic value as opposed to intrinsic value, and it's good. Something is good or bad, only according to external reasons. So and here we have intrinsically good, we have intrinsically neutral, we have intrinsically bad. And the concept of intrinsic value is mostly concerned with things. It's only sometimes concerned with actions, and it's when the deontic concepts are dependent on some kinds of intrinsic value explanations or considerations that the concept of intrinsic value can be connected with actions, but it doesn't talk about persons, because imagine that we are talking about a person being intrinsically good or intrinsically bad. That's kind of really strong, right? So that we think this person kind of by nature is good and or by nature is bad or evil, that they are just not good whatsoever. Whatever they do, their nature, it just has this thing in him or her. So that's kind of like really strong, right? So we don't frequently talk about persons by intrinsic value. When we talk about persons, we use this concept of moral worth. So moral worth are used to evaluate. So they refer to or they are relevant to this to evaluation of persons and their characters. So it's the theory of moral worth is a theory of virtue. So a person with positive moral worth is a morally good person. They would be virtuous, they would have all these virtues. And a person with negative moral worth are like kind of overall morally bad person. They don't have all these virtues. They probably have some characteristics of the opposite of virtues. So we have these three concepts. Now we have this structure of a moral theory. So firstly, this is like a standard construction of a moral theory, but the actual theory is strongly determined by how the theory relates to these different branches. So the theory of right conduct or the theory of value, sometimes the theory has different emphasis. Some theory might lean toward one component like particularly heavily. We'll talk about more of this as we go deeper into that class, into our class. But I think the standard kind of like structure is that it would have this theory of right conduct to tell us, what's right or wrong. And they will have this theory of a value that it has like this theory of intrinsic value to tell us that what things are good or bad. And then it has the other part of this theory that tells us about what people should be considered as morally good or morally bad. So that's our structure. So for the evaluation of moral theories, I didn't want to talk about these criteria like in too many details. I just want to quickly talk about them. So for consistency, you want your moral theory and your moral principle to generate contradictory results. So if an action is right, it should be right like throughout. It can't just be like right on one occasion, then wrong on the other occasion according to a principle. You can't contradict yourself. Determinacy refers to that your theory can't be too general, too vague. So for instance, if your moral principle is just like to love people or to respect people, there are a lot of questions that are unanswered. If you didn't do like further work. So what is love? What counts as love? What counts as respect? Can I just act on the surface without truly meaning it? Does that count? So it can't be too vague or too general. You have to be able to apply it. So for instance, if the moral principle is that what generates the most happiness in the world is right, then it's hard to use it because it's very hard to measure the happiness of people. It's very hard to know what action will determine what results. So because we can't, foresee the future, how do I know what my action is gonna actually lead to? Sometimes we mean good things, but then that results in terrible things, right? And causation just works in this very complicated way. Sometimes one thing I do might have profound influence for someone that's far, far away from me. So it's very hard to predict, and it's also very hard to calculate, and it's very hard to take into account all the possible effects that I might have. So you want your moral principle, you want your moral theory to be able to be like applied to your actual real life cases instead of only like an abstract principle that doesn't really help you to make any more judgments. So also there is initial appeal. So I guess we all have this kind of feeling or intuition or idea that something is just like appealing to you. So for instance, you might feel like the idea that if we harm other people's well-being, that can't be right, that can't be moral. So that is your initial appeal. So if a theory, it kind of speaks to, it kind of, makes sense, your initial appeal, it kind of responds to or kind of captures your initial appeal, that counts as a reason to favor that moral theory. And the other reason is kind of closely related to this is internal support. So we humans disagree with each other, but we agree on a lot of things. At least most of us can easily agree on the idea that killing is bad. It shouldn't be considered as a moral, at least in most cases, right? So all those things that most people, if not all people, kind of like easily agree on, and those common moral beliefs we share, and they are moral beliefs, and frequently, they are very initially appealing to all of us. So theories like this, so we if some theories, they are, so if they kind of embody or they kind of really like capture or make sense of those like common moral beliefs we have, we call them, we think they are internally supported. So it can be internally supported in the strong sense that it has to like kind of embody or kind of represent those common moral beliefs you have, you know, to be considered as a good moral theory. Or it can be weakly kind of internally supported, that it doesn't have to kind of like represent or entail or carry our idea of the or our like common moral beliefs. It only has to not contradict our common moral beliefs. As long as they're kind of consistent with our common moral beliefs, they should be considered as like the internally supporting, thus a good moral theory in this weak sense. And a moral theory is considered as attractive if it has like, sorry, this is like really noisy here. I'm gonna finish up this soon. If it has good explanatory power, it can really explain why some right things are right and why some wrong things are wrong. If it can like fulfill that theoretical purpose we had like really well, we should consider it as a good moral theory. And another reason is external support. So it might not directly like support or kind of respond to or is consistent with like our moral beliefs, but it might be like very compatible with, or it might kind of like embody, or it might represent or entail some of other theories that are attractive and appealing and are strong in other fields such as metaphysics or psychology or other brands of philosophy. So if one of our moral theories kind of really is really compatible and work well with for instance a psychological theory, it is sometimes a reason to favor a moral theory and to consider that moral theory as attractive. So I guess that's all for this unit, and I hope you've enjoyed the reading. So please do discussion polls. Please let me know if there are any questions. Come to the office hours or email me or anything. So thank you very much and see you soon.